I woke up that Saturday morning thinking it was going to be just another peaceful weekend at my lake house. The sunlight shimmered across the water, birds were calling to each other from the trees, and the smell of fresh pine filled the air. Everything looked perfect, the kind of quiet that makes you want to pour a cup of coffee and just sit for hours watching the world. My car sat in its usual spot at the edge of the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun, completely ordinary. At least until I checked my emails. That's when I saw it, a message from HOA Karen. My stomach sank instantly. For those who haven't met Karen, let me paint the picture. She's the kind of person who can make a spreadsheet for the color of garden gnomes, a checklist for fence height, and an official complaint form if your mailbox is slightly crooked. Her idea of fun is patrolling the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, making sure every blade of grass is within HOA regulations. She's the kind of person who would call the police if a squirrel dared to nest in the wrong tree. Anyway, the email was short, but the tone was aggressive. Your vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations, it read. My initial reaction was laughter. Of course she had noticed my car. Karen notices everything. She notices when the paint on a neighbor's mailbox chips by 0.2 millimeters, for crying out loud. But then I read the next line. She threatened that the vehicle could be towed if I didn't comply immediately. My laughter died in my throat. I rolled my eyes and muttered, really, Karen, towing over a car parked exactly where it belongs? I figured she was bluffing, as she usually does. She loves making a big deal about the tiniest infractions, but I've lived here long enough to know most of her threats are empty. Still, there was something about this message that set my nerves on edge. Maybe it was the word immediately, or maybe it was that smug little signature at the bottom, Karen, HOA Enforcement Officer. I tried to shake it off, pouring my coffee and staring at the lake. The water sparkled in the sunlight like nothing could possibly go wrong. It's fine, I told myself. She's bluffing, she always bluffs. But even as I said it, a tiny part of me started imagining a bright yellow tow truck pulling into my driveway, chains rattling, and my car slowly being dragged away while Karen smiled and waved a clipboard like a flag of victory. I decided I needed to prepare just in case. I looked up the HOA bylaws online, and as I skimmed through pages of incomprehensible legal jargon, my skepticism grew. According to the rules, I had done nothing wrong. My car was on my property, I paid my taxes, I was legally allowed to park it exactly where it sat, but Karen doesn't care much about facts, only appearances. She cares about power. By mid-morning, I could hear the distant hum of activity across the neighborhood. Neighbors mowing lawns, kids running, the occasional dog barking, everything normal. And yet I felt like I was waiting for a storm that only I could see. My coffee cup sat untouched as I imagined the confrontation to come. How far would she go? Was this the day Karen finally went too far? I walked outside, trying to make myself feel better by breathing the crisp morning air, but then I noticed something strange. On my windshield was a bright, glossy flyer I hadn't seen before. It had a company logo, a phone number, and a list of services. Tow truck service. My stomach sank. She wasn't bluffing. Someone or something was coming for my car. I picked up the flyer, studying it carefully. The company looked official enough. They had a website listed. They had a hotline. My heart raced. My first thought was, this can't be real. There's no way Karen actually arranged a legitimate tow without my knowledge. My second thought was, what if it is? I dropped the flyer on the hood of my car and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about principle, sanity, and the absurdity of living under someone like Karen. I knew at that moment that I couldn't just ignore this. Something told me that today the quiet lake house life was over. Something told me that Karen was about to push things way too far, and that I was about to find out just how far she could go. I spent the rest of the morning steeling myself. By noon, I decided it was time to face Karen directly. If she wanted a battle over a car that wasn't even in violation of anything, fine, I'd meet her head-on. I grabbed my keys and drove to the HOA office, trying to imagine what I might say without letting my sarcasm completely betray me. Not an easy task when Karen's the type of person who lives for confrontation. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw her immediately. She was standing in front of the HOA building, clipboard in hand, like some general preparing for war. Her expression was sharp, smug, and just the tiniest bit unhinged, her favorite combination. She spotted me and straightened, giving me the kind of glare that makes you second-guess every life choice that brought you to this exact moment. "Ah, just the resident I wanted to see," she said, voice dripping with satisfaction. "We need to talk about your vehicle." I smirked. "Oh, really? I thought we were going to discuss your impressive collection of rule violations, like the time you painted your mailbox neon pink in the middle of the night." I immediately regretted it. Sarcasm is a weapon you have to wield carefully around Karen. Sometimes it deflects tension, other times it fuels the fire. Karen did not miss a beat. "Do not test me," she said sharply. She waved her clipboard like it was a sword. "Your car is in violation and action has been taken. It could be towed at any moment." I raised an eyebrow. Action has been taken. What action? You sent me an email with Comic Sans warning me that my car might be towed. That's action. I tried to keep my voice light, but my stomach churned. She leaned closer as if proximity could make her words more threatening. We are serious. This is official. The towing company has been contacted. You have exactly 24 hours to comply. 24 hours, that's all I had. And just like that, the calm weekend I'd imagined was gone. I wanted to ask how she even got the company involved without my knowledge, but something told me that asking questions wouldn't help. Karen doesn't answer questions. She only issues commands and smiles smugly when people panic. I tried to reason with her. Karen, this is ridiculous. My car isn't in violation. It's parked on my property. There's no law, no regulation, nothing that says I can't park here. Why are we doing this? She tapped her clipboard. Because I said so. Her smug smile widened, and because rules are rules. At that moment, I felt a mix of disbelief and amusement. I had to admit, Karen really committed to her role. She looked like she was auditioning for a movie about obsessive HOA presidents. I almost laughed, almost. But then I noticed something sticking to my car through the window, bright and glossy, the flyer from the towing company. My pulse spiked. I realized then that she wasn't bluffing. She had actually called someone, or at least made it look like she had. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this some scam, some bluff to scare me, or had Karen really hired a company that would tow my car from my own driveway? Karen must have sensed my hesitation because she smiled, satisfied. See that flyer? That's your 24-hour warning. Your car will be removed if you do not comply. She turned and walked inside the office, leaving me standing in the parking lot, holding back both laughter and panic. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm down. My first thought was to call the company. My second thought was to Google them, check reviews, check for a license. My curiosity and anxiety were now tangled together in a knot so tight I could barely think straight. And as I looked at the lake glimmering in the distance, I realized this was only the beginning. Karen had thrown down the gauntlet. The question was her company real, or was this some elaborate bluff? Either way, I wasn't going to back down. Something told me that if I didn't figure this out quickly, my car and my weekend peace might be gone. And the thought of facing her smirk again while someone towed my car sent a shiver down my spine. I spent the rest of the afternoon staring at that flyer, my coffee long gone and my nerves fraying. The towing company Karen claimed to have hired looked official at first glance, shiny letters, a phone number, even a website. On paper, it seemed legitimate, but as I read it, something felt off. My gut told me there was more to this than a simple HOA power trip. I decided to call the number listed. The phone rang a few times, then went to voicemail. The greeting was generic, robotic, and strangely formal, like it had been recorded in a sound booth. Thank you for calling Tow & Go Services. We are currently unavailable. Please leave a message. I left a brief, polite inquiry about scheduling a tow for my car, partly to see if they'd actually respond, partly to calm the pit in my stomach. No one called back. I decided to check the website. It looked professional, stock photos of tow trucks, smiling drivers, a fake-looking customer testimonial here and there. But the more I clicked, the more inconsistencies I found. The address listed was for a strip mall that Google Maps said was completely empty. The About Us page had a paragraph filled with buzzwords, but no real details about ownership or licensing. Even the email address was generic, ending in at Tow & Go Services, com rather than an official business domain. I laughed nervously. This has to be a joke, I muttered aloud, but deep down, the pit in my stomach was growing. Karen had gone to a lot of effort to make this look real. She had put up flyers, sent emails, and even made it look like an official company had been contracted. Whoever this was, if it wasn't a legitimate company, someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make it seem convincing. My next step was social media. I checked Facebook, LinkedIn, and Yelp. Nothing, no reviews, no business listings, no employees. If this company existed, it had somehow completely avoided leaving a digital footprint. Even stranger, there were photos of trucks on the site, but reverse image searches revealed they were stock images used elsewhere by other businesses. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. The humor of the situation hit me. Karen, with all her HOA power, had potentially fallen for the oldest trick in the book. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe the tow company wasn't real, but the threat was enough to scare me into compliance. I had to find out which it was. I decided to call a few neighbors. Hey, have you ever seen Tow & Go in the neighborhood? Do they have trucks here? I asked, trying to sound casual. Most of them laughed. Tow & Go, never heard of them, one neighbor said. Are you sure that's even a real company? Another suggested I check with the DMV or the Better Business Bureau. I jotted down everything, feeling the first hints of a strategy forming. As the day wore on, the suspense built. I could picture Karen packing in her office, imagining me panicking as the tow truck arrived. She probably thought she had planned everything perfectly, and maybe she had if her goal was to scare me, but I wasn't about to be intimidated by a company that might not even exist. I felt a surge of determination. I would investigate, document, and expose whatever trick Karen had tried to pull. I'd call every number, research every detail, and make sure she couldn't get away with threatening my car like this. If she thought I would roll over because of a fake towing service, she had another thing coming. By evening, I had a folder of screenshots, notes, and phone numbers. My apartment, or rather my temporary war room, looked like a scene from a detective movie. The more I uncovered, the funnier it became in a darkly satisfying way. Karen had overreached, and now it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. As the sun set over the lake, casting golden light across the water, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about Karen's obsession with control, about how far someone will go to enforce rules that don't even exist. And it was about proving that no matter how loud she shouts or how many fake companies she hires, the truth always has a way of surfacing. I took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and oddly excited. Tomorrow, I thought, I would confront Karen with evidence. Tomorrow, I would see just how far her bluff really went. And somewhere deep down, I smiled at the thought of her reaction when she realized I wasn't the frightened, compliant neighbor she expected me to be. I woke up before sunrise, my mind buzzing with anticipation and a little dread. Today was the day the towing company Karen had hired was supposed to arrive. I got dressed slowly, trying not to look too eager, and stepped outside to see my car gleaming peacefully in the driveway, completely unaware of the drama about to unfold. The morning was quiet, almost deceptively so. Birds chirped, the lake sparkled, and the occasional neighbor waved from across the street. Everything seemed normal, and yet every minute that passed felt like the calm before a storm. I kept checking the street, expecting to see a tow truck rolling down the road like a vehicle of doom. Then I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A bright yellow truck pulled into the neighborhood, slightly oversized for a regular tow truck, with tow and go services painted on the side in bold letters. The driver, wearing a neon safety vest and a hard hat that looked 2 sizes too big, climbed down with a clipboard in hand. My stomach dropped, but I reminded myself that appearances can be deceiving. Karen arrived shortly after, striding down the street like a conqueror. She held a stack of papers, waving them as if she were declaring victory. Her expression was that same smug, self-satisfied grin she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. My heart raced, not from fear but from the absurdity of it all. I could practically hear the dramatic soundtrack playing in my head. "Ah, there it is," Karen called out, pointing at my car. "This is the vehicle in violation. I've had everything handled. It will be towed immediately." The driver approached my car cautiously, chains clinking as he examined it. I watched his every move, trying to assess if he actually knew what he was doing. And then he froze, just froze. His hands hovered over the hooks, his eyes darted nervously to his clipboard, and he muttered, I need approval from headquarters before I can tow this vehicle." Karen blinked, her confident smile faltered for the first time. "Approval? What approval? I signed off on this," she said, her voice slightly higher than usual. The driver shuffled his feet. I just need verification from the main office. Can you hold on a minute?" I couldn't help but laugh, the tension breaking just slightly. This was it, the first crack in Karen's plan. She had built up this whole scenario, the perfect intimidation tactic, and now the supposed professional couldn't even touch my car. Karen's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean verification? This is official." I leaned casually against the hood of my car, pretending to be calm while secretly enjoying every second. "Looks like your towing company might need a bit more paperwork than you realized," I said, letting a little smirk slip. The driver shuffled awkwardly, glancing at Karen and back at me. I can't proceed without confirmation. Headquarters handles everything." Karen's expression shifted from smug to confused and then to flustered. She waved her papers as if they could magically make the truck move. "This is ridiculous. They said everything was cleared. Why isn't it being towed?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my amusement under control. "Maybe it's time to check if your official towing company is actually real," I suggested gently, though the words carried a bite. Karen's mouth opened and closed, clearly trying to find a comeback. Her gestures became frantic, waving the papers like a shield. The driver muttered something under his breath and quickly climbed back into his truck, leaving my car untouched. The bright yellow truck roared away down the street, leaving only the faint scent of exhaust in the air. Karen turned to me, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't just, this isn't over." I smiled, trying not to laugh too hard. "Oh, I think it is," I said. At least for now, looks like your company isn't exactly as real as you thought." As she stormed back toward her office, muttering under her breath, I leaned against my car and exhaled. The sun glinted off the lake, the neighborhood buzzed as usual, and my car remained exactly where it belonged. For the first time that day, I felt a surge of relief and just a touch of satisfaction. Karen had tried to intimidate me with a flashy tow truck and a fake company, but it hadn't worked. Not today, not on my watch. And somewhere deep down, I knew that the story was far from over. Karen would regroup, plan her next move, and I would need to be ready. But for now, I could enjoy the small victory of a car still parked safely in my driveway and the undeniable truth that her plan had failed spectacularly. After the debacle with the tow truck, I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for Karen's next move. Something about the whole situation gnawed at me. That company tow and go services didn't feel real. And if Karen thought a fake towing service would scare me, she clearly underestimated how stubborn I could be. I decided it was time to dig deeper and find out once and for all what was going on. I started with the basics. The company's flyer, the website, the phone number, they all had to be checked. I called the number again, leaving another message just to see if anyone would actually respond. This time, the voicemail was even more robotic, repeating the same generic lines. No call back. I laughed nervously. This is either the worst real company ever or the best fake company ever, I muttered to myself. Next, I turned to the internet. The website looked polished, professional, but something didn't sit right. I ran a reverse image search on the trucks pictured. Sure enough, they were stock photos taken from multiple unrelated sources online. I tried searching for the company on business directories and social media, but nothing came up. No employees, no reviews, no complaints, nothing. My thoughts started to race. Had Karen actually hired a real company? Or had she pulled some sort of stunt, making it look like my car was at risk, knowing I'd freak out? Either scenario was both ridiculous and genius in its own twisted way. Determined to get answers, I decided to go old-school detective. I called neighbors who lived nearby, trying to casually ask if they had ever seen tow and go trucks in the area. Most laughed. "Tow and go, never heard of them," one said. "Are you sure that's a real company?" Another neighbor suggested I check with the DMV to see if the company was licensed. I jotted everything down, feeling like I was building a case piece by piece. Next, I called a few local towing companies, asking if they'd ever heard of tow and go services. Blank stares on the other end of the line. "Never heard of them. No one in this area uses that name," one dispatcher told me. My suspicion grew. The more I looked, the more it seemed that Karen had either hired a completely fake company or somehow found a way to create the illusion of one. I spent hours on the phone, online, and scribbling notes. I had screenshots of the website, photos of the flyer, and a detailed log of phone calls. By the time evening rolled around, I had a folder that could probably qualify as a small case file, and somewhere deep down I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. I was no detective, but I was learning fast, and the thrill of unraveling this absurd HOA mystery kept me going. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Karen, armed with her clipboard and her obsession for control, had attempted an intimidation tactic that could have been pulled straight from a sitcom. A fake towing company? Really? It was simultaneously ridiculous, irritating, and kind of impressive in its audacity. But beneath the humor, the tension lingered. Karen was clever, manipulative, and absolutely relentless when she set her mind on something. I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. I had to be ready for her next move. I had to document everything, double-check every detail, and prepare for the confrontation that was inevitably coming. As night fell, I sat by my window overlooking the lake, the water reflecting the last light of day. The neighborhood was quiet now, but I could feel the storm of Karen's obsession simmering somewhere in the distance. My car was safe for now, but I knew the real test was coming, and I also knew something important: knowledge was power. The more I learned about this fake company, the stronger my position would be when the time came to confront Karen. By the time I turned off my laptop and set my folder aside, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and apprehension. I had uncovered the truth, or at least most of it, and yet the game was far from over. Tomorrow, I decided I would confront Karen directly, armed with evidence, clarity, and a determination that even her obsessive tactics couldn't shake. And deep down, I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when the reality of her plan unraveled before her very eyes. The next morning, I knew it was time to confront Karen. I had my evidence neatly organized. Screenshots of the towing company's website, reverse image search results showing the stock photos, notes from neighbors, and phone call logs confirming no one had ever heard of tow and go services. I felt ready, more ready than I had ever felt in dealing with her theatrics. I drove to the HOA office with my folder in hand, my heart racing but my mind sharp. Karen was already there, waiting, clipboard in hand as usual. She looked as smug as ever, as if she had already won some invisible trophy for HOA enforcement. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and stepped inside. Ah, you're back, she said, her smile sharp and controlled. I trust you're here to comply with the rules now. I smiled politely. Actually, Karen, I'm here to discuss your so-called towing company. I placed my folder on the desk and opened it, sliding the first document toward her. I did some research and it turns out tow and go services isn't real. Her smile faltered just for a moment, but she recovered quickly. Not real, what do you mean? She asked, voice slightly higher than usual. I leaned on the counter, calm and collected. I mean, the website uses stock photos. The phone number goes to a generic voicemail. No one in the area has ever seen your trucks, and the address you provided doesn't exist. I could see her eyes flicking toward the screenshots and then back at me, searching for a way to spin this. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She shuffled some papers, pretending to review them. Well, maybe there was a mistake, a clerical error, she said. Her voice lacked the usual confidence. I shook my head. A clerical error doesn't explain the dozens of phone calls I made, the neighbors I spoke to, or the fact that the truck driver froze when he arrived because he needed approval from headquarters. Karen, this entire thing was a setup. You tried to intimidate me with a fake company and it didn't work. For the first time, I saw real panic in her eyes. She muttered something under her breath, waving her hands as if she could erase the evidence before me. Well, maybe the rules are still valid. You're still in violation of. I interrupted gently but firmly. No, Karen, I'm in full compliance, and threatening a fake towing company doesn't change that. The rules cannot be enforced based on something that isn't real. Her gestures became frantic. She waved papers in the air like magic wands, trying to summon some authority that clearly didn't exist. You can't just, I have the HOA's authority. I opened another folder page, showing her official DMV checks and local business records. Authority is meaningless when it's built on lies. I did the research. The company isn't licensed. No permits, no business registration, nothing. Your so-called enforcement is void. She stepped back, the panic growing. Her clipboard, once a weapon of intimidation, now seemed like a useless prop. She looked around, clearly trying to find anyone who would support her claims. But the office was empty, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She was completely exposed. I sat back slightly, letting the silence do some of the work. Karen, this could have been handled with a simple conversation, but you escalated unnecessarily. You tried to scare me and it backfired. There's still time to de-escalate, to admit the mistake and move on. Her shoulders slumped and her voice dropped to a whisper. I just wanted to enforce the rules. And you overreached, I replied. Rules don't give anyone the right to invent a company and try to tow a neighbor's car. That's not enforcement, it's intimidation. She stared at me for a moment, then at the documents on the desk, and finally her face shifted into a mixture of defeat and embarrassment. I could almost hear the gears in her head turning, realizing that she had lost control and the narrative. I stood, gathering my folder. Let's make this simple. No fake companies, no towing threats, the car stays, and maybe next time consider that intimidation tactics don't always work. Karen nodded weakly, muttering something under her breath that sounded like, I understand. I left the office feeling a mix of relief, satisfaction, and quiet triumph. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but smirk. Karen had tried her grand plan to scare me into submission, but the truth had won. And somewhere in the neighborhood, I knew the story would spread. Karen's attempt at intimidation had spectacularly failed. The day after the showdown, I could feel a strange energy in the neighborhood. There's always gossip when Karen's involved, and I had a front row seat. People were whispering, glancing over fences, and sharing stories about the infamous towing fiasco. Somehow, Karen's big enforcement move had turned into the talk of the street, and not in the way she had hoped. I spent the morning checking on my car, parked safely in its usual spot. It was intact, unscathed, and exactly where it belonged. That alone felt like a victory, but I knew Karen wasn't done scheming yet. She's the kind of person who never admits defeat, especially when her authority is challenged. Around mid-morning, I received a call from a local authority, someone I had reached out to during my investigation of Tow and Go. They confirmed what I had already suspected. The company was completely unlicensed. No records, no registration, no employees. It didn't exist. The relief I felt was almost comical. Karen had tried to intimidate me with an imaginary company, and it had blown up spectacularly in her face. I couldn't help but imagine her scrambling at home, muttering and waving papers around, trying to convince herself that it was all legitimate. Her plan had unraveled faster than I could have hoped. I smiled to myself, leaning back in my chair, thinking about how absurd the situation was. A fake towing company, a furious HOA president, and a car that hadn't moved an inch. Classic Karen. Later that afternoon, I spotted her across the street packing in front of her house. Her usual confident stride was replaced by hesitation, her clipboard held like a shield rather than a weapon. She was on the phone, clearly talking to someone in a panic. I couldn't hear everything, but phrases like "need to cover this up" and "it's gone wrong" drifted through the air. The absurdity of it all made me chuckle quietly. I walked over casually, pretending to be calm. Karen saw me and froze. You're still here," she said, her voice tight. "This isn't over." I shook my head, smiling. "Oh, it's over. The towing company doesn't exist. Every record you've tried to use as proof, fake. Every threat, empty. You overreached, Karen, and everyone knows it now." Her face twisted in frustration. She tried to argue, claiming there were still rules to enforce, but her words lacked conviction. Even she could see the ground slipping beneath her. Neighbors started appearing, drawn by the spectacle. Some offered sympathetic smiles, others tried to stifle laughter. Karen waved her hands frantically, attempting to assert authority, but no one was paying attention anymore. Her credibility, once a powerful weapon, had evaporated. I decided to push the point home. "Karen, this could have been handled with a conversation. Instead, you created a fake company, tried to intimidate me, and now everyone knows. You've lost more than just authority, you've lost trust." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her posture slumped, and for the first time I saw genuine defeat. The bravado, the bluster, the ridiculous threats, all gone. All that was left was a woman realizing her plan had spectacularly failed. By the end of the day, it was clear. Karen had nowhere to go. Her bluff was called, her plan dismantled, and the neighborhood had witnessed it all. The tow truck debacle had become a story everyone shared, laughing at the absurdity of the whole ordeal. Even I had to admit, it was satisfying to see her plan collapse so completely. As I watched the sun set over the lake, I felt a wave of relief. My car was safe, my peace was restored, and Karen's obsession had been exposed for what it was, a mix of control, vanity, and sheer overreach. Sometimes I realized the best way to win is not with anger, but with patience, research, and a little quiet determination. Karen's reputation had taken a hit, and I could almost hear the whispers spreading. She tried to hire a fake tow company. It wasn't just a small victory, it was a complete dismantling of her authority in front of everyone. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, smiling at the absurdity of it all. Karen had tried to play the game, but the truth always finds a way. And sometimes, just sometimes, winning feels that sweet, quiet, satisfying. The days following Karen's spectacular failure were, for lack of a better word, peaceful. My car stayed exactly where it belonged, gleaming in the driveway as if nothing had ever happened. The lake shimmered like glass, birds chirped, and the occasional neighbor waved as I sipped my morning coffee. Life felt almost normal again, which, after weeks of Karen-induced chaos, was a welcome relief. I couldn't help but notice subtle changes in the neighborhood. People who had been wary of Karen before were now less cautious around her. Conversations in the local coffee shop often drifted toward the infamous tow truck incident, and everyone laughed about it. I even overheard one neighbor joking, "If Karen tries to tow your car, make sure you check if the company is real first." I chuckled to myself. Karen had always tried to wield authority like a weapon, but the universe had a funny way of keeping things balanced. Her over-the-top attempt to intimidate me had not only failed, but it had also highlighted her obsession with control in front of the entire neighborhood. Of course, Karen didn't disappear entirely. I still saw her patrolling the streets, clipboard in hand, but now there was a subtle shift in her posture. Her steps were less confident, her gestures less dramatic. Even she had to realize that her credibility had taken a hit. There's only so long you can insist on enforcing rules with threats before people start questioning your judgment, and hers had been exposed. I spent some time reflecting on what had happened. At first, it had been stressful, even nerve-wracking. I had feared that she could actually follow through with a tow, that my car, or worse, my sense of control over my own life, might be at risk. But as the days passed, I realized there was a bigger lesson here. Patience, persistence, and careful investigation always win against empty threats. Karen had underestimated me, and that mistake had been her undoing. My friends and family were delighted to hear about the incident. Every retelling seemed to get funnier, especially when I described the neon yellow tow truck, the driver freezing in the driveway, and Karen frantically waving her clipboard. I could see it in their eyes. They loved the absurdity, the drama, and the fact that the little guy, or in this case me, had won against HOA tyranny. One afternoon, I decided to walk around the neighborhood just to check in. Neighbors smiled knowingly, some even whispering conspiratorially, "She tried it and it backfired." I smiled in return. It felt good to know that Karen's bluff had been exposed and that my determination and calm had made a difference, not just for me, but for everyone who had witnessed the absurdity firsthand. By sunset, I returned to my driveway and looked at my car. It was untouched, safe, and more importantly, a symbol of standing your ground. I realized that sometimes life gives you these absurd moments, these little battles that seem over the top at the time, but handling them with composure can turn them into victories you didn't expect. Karen, for all her theatrics, was a reminder that authority doesn't always equate to truth, and intimidation doesn't always succeed. Sometimes it's the quiet persistence, the fact-checking, the preparation, the refusal to be bullied that wins the day. And in my case, that meant my car stayed where it belonged, my peace of mind remained intact, and Karen's grand plan collapsed in the most spectacularly comedic way possible. As the last rays of sunlight glinted off the lake, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just because I had outsmarted Karen, but because I had maintained my composure, documented the truth, and allowed reality to speak for itself. It was a victory that didn't need shouting, threats, or dramatics, just patience, evidence, and a little sense of humor. And from that day forward, every time I drove past the HOA office or saw Karen packing with her clipboard, I couldn't help but smile. Because no matter how dramatic her schemes became, I knew the truth was always on my side, and in the end, the little victories, the smart planning, and a steady hand always win. The lake sparkled, my car gleamed, and the neighborhood, well, it had just witnessed the most unforgettable HOA meltdown in recent memory. And I got to enjoy the quiet, victorious peace that comes with knowing I had stood my ground and won. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.